Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. I am in my monthly episode of Scatter Shooting with Scott. Scott is one of my dearest friends. He shows up every month to talk about a wide variety of subjects. And tonight we've got a couple of fun ones to talk about. Scott, how you doing?
Ahoy, hoy, how's it going? I'm
It
doing
is
well. How are you?
It is so good to see you. I always love our talks. And before we hit record, you go, huh, so what are you thinking of the box set tracks too? So I'll turn this around. What are your thoughts?
I'm really excited about it. 7 unreleased albums, that's pretty exciting. You think about any great artist out there, and we're going to talk about Van Morrison. So if someone said, hey, we're going to put out 7 unreleased Van Morrison albums, we're going to put out 7 unreleased Tom Petty albums, we're going to put out 7 unreleased Marvin Gaye albums, they'd be like, yes, please, more. So Bruce Springsteen is definitely up there for me. The excitement, and anybody who listens to your show obviously knows that Bruce is extremely prolific in songwriting and in the studio. And I remember Max Weinberg saying they recorded upwards of 70 songs for the Born in the USA album. I don't know how true that is because it doesn't seem like 70 are out there, but maybe it's true. But there were a lot of songs left in the can on that one, and there was a long recording process. And really starting from Darkness on the Edge of Town through the 80s, I don't know about Tunnel of Love, but even after that, there was a lot of stuff. And there's just a treasure trove, as we saw with tracks one. And this one, Bruce had maybe was it like a year and a half ago, like put out a little statement about, hey, I got a bunch of unreleased albums from the 90s. And I remember thinking to myself, if any of the stuff he releases from the 90s is better than Human Touch and Lucky Town, I'm gonna be pissed.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, not my two, some great songs on those, but not my two favorite albums. But I'm really excited, especially that first one is those 1983 LA Garage demos that I have in bootleg form, and he's released some of them. And if in another interview with Max Weinberg, it sounds like Max had replaced the drum machine that was added. That's at least what it sounds like. I'm not sure. So I
Yeah.
don't have any inside scoop on that. I do know somebody who's listened to it in full. I cannot divulge his name or her name, but I haven't been filled in on that. So it's a mystery. Right now, Bruce is for sure keeping it a mystery. We got one song released. It's really good, Rain in the River. I really enjoy it. And we'll see. I'm very excited. Even if it's uncommercial stuff, I can promise you there's going to be at least one or two or 12 songs on there that I'm just absolutely going to love.
If you think about when he did tracks, there were songs I loved, there were songs that I thought were okay, and there were songs that I didn't care for. But I think that's almost any, no one is going to love everything. And so I was talking to my son, and my son's a huge WWE fan.
Okay.
This is WrestleMania week as we're talking, and he's all excited. And he said, when I told him about the box set, he said, okay, I'm going to put this in my terms. You tell me there are 7 matches that were never filmed with Cody Rhodes doing John Cena. That rumor had was this amazing
Right.
show that was not broadcast, and I get a chance to see that. I'm saying take my money,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're good. And he said, so I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Certainly not to break any confidence, but I'd love to hear what your source thinks after they get a chance to spend some time with it.
I can tell you right now, if you want to hear it, this person, I will not divulge their gender,
Yes.
said it's going to be a hard listen for some people. It's different. Particularly pointed out the Inyo album, I think,
Okay.
which was I think a lot of drum loops and stuff. It said it's
Yeah.
not going to find the traditional E Street Band sound in a lot of them. Really, probably any of them. Maybe I don't know. Rain in the River kind of had an E Street Band sound to
It
me.
did. Yeah.
I love Fugitive Dream is like one of my favorite unreleased songs, and there's looks like there's two of them on there. So I'm
Mhm.
excited about it, and I'm okay with that. I'm interested in seeing the road that Bruce was taking, and it didn't dissuade me. It made me want to hear it more.
Yeah. What's funny and is right before this, Sylvan and I were recording our John Hyatt podcast where we are going through every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. And we break it down and we then go through the lyrics and then we rate it on a scale 1 to 5. And I sent the link to Rain in the River, sent the lyric video, and we did that. We discussed it. And what do you think about the song? You said you liked it. What do you think the song's about?
I haven't really done a real deep dive on the
Okay.
lyrics right now. I just love the mood it sets. I
Yeah.
love the production. It's really almost a wall of soundish kind of thing
Yeah.
going on. You really have only heard it 2 or 3 times, but I've enjoyed it each time, and I'll analyze it sometime down the road.
So I think it's a murder ballad. So
Okay.
you'll have to let me know what you think. But yeah, we said it was good. Not great, but it was good. And it
Hmm.
was just great to hear new Springsteen music.
New Springsteen music.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the idea if it's an unpublished Stephen King novel or something that you're going, wow, here was a John Ford movie that he had not released.
Right.
So it just the creative vision of it, and I know there's a couple similar to Western Stars accordingly. There's one that
Which I
feels
love. Yeah.
I love Western Stars too. But a little it's not the gospel album, but it has a gospel. It was almost going to be for a movie soundtracks, the alternate universes that could have happened.
I'm intrigued by the Somewhere North of Nashville album.
Yes.
Intrigued. I would like to know when that was recorded. It's obviously most likely 2000s. I think it was probably recorded before Western Stars. And it seems like it might be another countryish thing. And he's got a version of Janie Don't You Lose Heart and a version of Stand on It on there, both Born in the USA B-sides that were both kind of
Yeah.
country sounding. In fact, Mel McDaniel, who had a hit with that song "Baby's Got Her Blue Jeans On," covered "Stand on It" in the '80s. That's one I'm really intrigued. And I also it makes total sense because I don't know how empty the vault is his earlier albums. I'm talking '70s and '80s.
Right.
Now I know there was that song "Evacuation of the West," which they say was recorded for the first album. And I have a bootleg version. That's fully record. That's a full band. It's mixed. I don't know. I've heard some songs that were recorded for the second album, and he released most of the Darkness stuff. I think a lot of the River outtakes were phenomenal. The ones that he released on the Ties That Bind. There was, as a Bruce Springsteen outtake aficionado, especially from that era, there were like 5 or 6 songs that I'd never even heard of. I'd never even seen that on a list. The way I liken it is my favorite movie of all time is American Graffiti.
Yes.
Uh,
Great movie. Yeah.
and it's about an hour and 53 minutes long, somewhere in that ballpark. And from everything I've read, that when they did the first production of it, when they first mixed down, if you want to say,
Yeah.
it was over 3 hours long. And I was like, wow, I would love to see the 3 hour version of
Yes.
American Graffiti. I was like, I know there were a couple deleted scenes that were later added when they re-released the movie in the late '70s, and now it's just become part of it. They're in everything. But I've never seen any other deleted footage. And with the movie was 3 hours long and it got whittled down to an hour and 50. We're talking an hour and 10 minutes of unreleased stuff that we haven't seen.
Yeah.
I'm very curious. This is what I think with the Bruce albums.
Yeah, I think so too. That's great. All right. I know we're going to talk about Van Morrison. As my warm up, I went back to Andrew Hickey's History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs
Right.
and listened to his episode on Astro Weeks. And I know very little about Van Morrison. I have listened to one of my good friends, Rick, who was actually the first person that knew John Hyatt, would play, this is in the late 80s, early 90s, albums of Van when he was doing a little more of the Irish songs and stuff. And I really loved him. So I'm
Hmm.
really looking forward to hearing you just did a article about this. So talk to me a little bit of what we're going to talk about tonight.
The article is about Brown Eyed Girl, and when I wrote the article, it was coming up on the time when he had recorded it I guess you could say he recorded it under duress. He had just left his first band, Them, I guess his only band. He was in another one before that, but they recorded one song. So he left Them, who had hits with the Gloria, the song that Gloria that Van had
Yeah.
written. It was a hit here in the United States for The Shadows of Night. And they had two other hits, Here Comes the Night and Mystic Eyes. And then Van left to go solo because it was really just by late 1966, it had become an amalgam of studio musicians and just singing, playing along with Van Morrison. And they were essentially solo records. And I think he wanted something more for himself. He wanted a solo career. And that also, when that happens, we see it in so many instances in the 50s and the 60s. It just caused angst and jealousy and frustration within the band. The members left, and the touring band had such turnover. And so he left and was just kind of trying to figure out his next course of action. He was totally misguided on his own. He couldn't figure it out. So along came Burt Burns, the great songwriter producer from New York, who had flown to England in 65 and produced Here Comes the Night. He wrote that song. That song was his. And he gave it to them. They had their first hit. Van liked Burt's style, and Van grew up just his father had his father had lived in Detroit for some time in the late 40s, early 50s, or he had amassed a very large blues and gospel and jazz collection, all black music, and he loved it. And he brought it home to Belfast and had one of the largest collections there. And so he grew up on black music. He loved it. In the early 60s, Burt Burns writes Twist and Shout for the Isley Brothers. He writes Cry to Me for Solomon Burke. He writes a little bit of Soak for the Jarmels. So Van knows these songs and he knows Burt Burns. And so he's probably happy to be working with Burt on his own. But, it's when he goes to the United States and records in New York that he sees how the sausage is made. And Van was never really one. He didn't like being directed in the studio. He liked being in control, even at that point where he was a nobody.
Hmm.
And Brown Eyed Girl was just something that I think Burt and a lot of the people involved at Bang Records, because that was the record label that he owned, and Neil Diamond was on Bang, and he got Van Morrison and had a few others. And they gravitated to Brown Eyed Girl. It was just an incredible song. And they formulated this great Gorgoni, I believe, played the intro to the real calypso styled intro, that guitar intro on Brown Eyed Girl. And they just came up with a great arrangement, got the sweet inspirations to sing those background vocals, and they released it and it went to number 10. And so it just alienated him from Burt. And the other big problem was that Burt Burns was really mobbed up. He was friends with a lot of guys who were in the Genovese crime family, and I don't know how deep he was involved in the day-to-day workings of the mafia, but I think he liked to exploit that when it suited his needs. There's a story I told in the article about when Neil Diamond was breaking away from Bang Records to go sign with Universal. Burt had sent some guys to go. Neil was just down in Greenwich Village playing a show at the bitter end and had somebody throw a stink bomb in there and end the show. Neil Diamond knew exactly what that meant and had to hide out in Long Island until he could make safe passage to Los Angeles. Van was well aware of the potential of Burt Burns, but lo and behold, Burt ends up passing away from heart failure. He had not rheumatoid arthritis, but rheumatic fever. And growing, he's had that since he was a kid. And he always had heart issues and almost had a few close calls with death, and was obviously in a very stressful career and had an explosive temper at times, they say. And he dies on December 30th, 1967, and his widow blames Van for it because it had given him a lot of stress. And Van has to retreat to Boston, to the Cambridge area, where he knows some people up there. He and his girlfriend Janet Gauder, who became later known as Janet Planet, his wife, and just hit out, became part of that scene up there. And that's really where he kind of reinvented his sound, and he gave us Astral Weeks.
Yeah. And I guess as he started to tour, when he did Brown Eyed Girl, he would do it a different way, correct?
Yeah, he would do it different ways. There's a live recording from 68 from Boston that was released by Van himself, maybe back in 2018. It was released for one day. You had one day to download it. I was able to get a copy of it, by the way. And yeah, I think I just recorded it off the internet. Somebody had it up there. But he does a version of Brown Eyed Girl with a completely Astral Weeks type arrangement. And it's actually my favorite version. It's beautiful. It's an audience recording, but it's a small, tiny club, and the sound, it's almost like you're sitting in the club listening to it. Eventually, he has played it live a lot. In my article, I compare it to Bruce Springsteen because there's all sorts of statistics on the web. Setlist.com has 868 live performances that Van has done of Brown Eyed Girl, which sounds like a lot. But
Wow.
when you looked at Born to Run, that's the song Born to Run came out 8 years after Brown Eyed Girl, and Bruce has played it live 1,800 and change. So when you compare it to that, Van's played it a lot, but he hasn't played it. It's obviously not a staple.
Yeah.
And it became one of those songs like when he did play it live, it's like when the Rolling Stones play Jumpin' Jack Flash, they do it in about a minute 20 at about Mach 10 speed, and it's over before you know it. And well, that was really not satisfying. You
Yeah,
know,
sure. No.
here's a gratuitous version of the I can't get no satisfaction, and it's over in less than a minute. Or
Yeah.
the old thing they do where they'll do a medley of hits, and the medley will be 3 minutes long, but it'll be like five songs.
Yeah.
So that old thing. Yeah, Brown Eyed Girl, and I do think that, and I make the point in my article, and people can check it out at scottshaauthor.com or at thestrangebrew.co.uk. Is that I think it's a bit contrived. I don't think Van hates it as much as it's very his alleged hatred for the song has become very popular, especially among Van Morrison fans. But I don't really think he hates it as much as he does. I think it takes him back to a rough time in his life, and he always wanted to be known as an artist, not as a hit maker. But I think he's obviously reaped the rewards from the hits, and he is an artist because of the hits, and so I do think it's a little bit contrived.
I remember reading, and I always get this wrong, so I apologize in advance because the way I remember it is totally wrong. But Carl Wilson was in an interview saying he was tired of doing Help Me Rhonda. And I'm
Yeah,
like, that can't be right.
sure.
Blow With Me Rhonda was one of the songs they had to do. And he said he was in the middle of a show when all of a sudden he just felt like, wow, I like singing this song. This is a fun song, right? And the other story I love, and this tells you how old I am, I was watching Linda Ronstadt on Johnny Carson, and she said in concert, I go, I don't want to do Blue Bayou. I'm tired of doing Blue Bayou.
Right.
Poor pitiful me. I don't feel like doing it. She goes, but just last month, I went to see Frank Sinatra for the first time. And she goes, and halfway through the show, I realized, oh my God, this is what my audience feels like when they're coming to
Right.
see me. I never feel bad about doing Bye Bye You again because I
Sure.
like doing that.
Yeah, it makes me think of the Eagles documentary, the Great Eagles documentary that came out maybe 10 or 12 years ago, where
Yeah.
Glenn Fry's talking about Randy Meisner quitting the band, and
Yeah.
Randy was tired of doing Take It to the Limit. And Glenn's, I know you're tired. You think I'm not tired of doing Take It Easy, but you got to do it. It's for the fans, it's not for you. And he records a handful of albums, two or three of them, which contain the solo version of "Take It to the Limit." And
Yeah.
whenever he played live, guess what song he always did was
Well,
"Take It to the
yeah.
Limit."
And I get it. That's that high note and everything. It's very interesting about that.
Yeah, and I get it, and I know Springsteen fans will consider this blasphemy, but if Bruce never did Thunder Road and Born to Run live again, I would be fine with that. Let's make room for some of the other great songs. In my collection, I have an iTunes, and I have about 93,000 songs on it. And Bruce is probably one of my bigger artists because I always, being where I work, I get a lot of access to the Nugs releases,
Yeah.
and I don't have all of, but most of the, not all, not like the ones that when he goes on tour and he releases every show.
Yeah.
I have a handful of those, but all the archival releases and
Yeah.
stuff like that, I have almost all of them. And when you can itemize your lists,
Yeah.
and when you go to song, you go to Born to Run, I probably have 100 versions of Born to Run. It's like White Christmas. It's just White
Yeah.
Christmas. Like I got like 100 artists who do White Christmas. And when Bruce changed it up for the Tunnel of Love Express tour in '88, when he just did a solo acoustic version, I absolutely love that. I love
I
that.
do. What's interesting is My first show was in 2002, the Rising Tour. And so the first 7 shows I went to, he had never played Thunder Road.
Oh, really?
So I had
Took
never
a
heard
break.
Thunder Road. Yeah. And then since then, he's played it in every show I've gone to. And my buddy feels the same way. He's take off Born to Run and give me something else from Western Stars or Tunnel of
Yeah,
Love
really.
or Magic or whatever you want. For that person who's never seen Bruce live before,
Sure.
that's
There's more of them than there are of us.
yeah. And so, yeah, you get it. And in fact, I've had Mark, who's been on several times, he said he stares at the stage every song at either Neil's or Little Steven or Bruce. But Born to Run comes, he turns his back to the stage and he watches the audience because he
Right.
gets that. So, yeah, I get
That's
that.
neat.
One of my best friends, Sam, has probably seen Dylan easily over 50 times. And he talks about that Dylan doesn't, his never ending latest tour, he does very little of what you would think are the Dylan hits, right? He just
Right.
does this. And it is the artist has to play what they want to play, but there is that mix of, but they want to hear the hits. They want to
For
hear the
sure.
oldies and they want to hear the new ones. So it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, I get Van Morrison's feelings towards playing that song live because I saw him live in 2016 in Forest Hills, New York, at the stadium there, the tennis stadium. And
Yeah.
he did play Brown Eyed Girl late in the set. I was with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law, and our mouths dropped open as we saw people just bolt for the exits. And he wasn't done. He had 3 more songs and he did Glory in the encore. I'm like, and we were just fascinated. You mean you said, and like when you look at that set list, I'm a Van Morrison fan. There's a lot of songs I don't know, and I have every Van Morrison album.
Yeah.
There's a lot of songs I didn't know that he did, but I enjoyed being there. But like to sit through all that for Brown Eyed Girl and then just leave,
Yeah.
that was incredible to me.
That's what they came for, to hear that one song?
That's yeah, that's either that or Moondance, and he didn't even play Moondance. I remember my brother-in-law was real bummed out. He said, "Oh, he didn't play Moondance."
Yeah.
I was like, he played a lot of other good songs though. He played Brown
Yeah.
Eyed Girl and Gloria. Yeah, that's what I thought that they just came to hear Brown Eyed Girl. And if Brown Eyed Girl was the first song, they probably would have left. So there's a
Yeah.
reason that you do those ones late in the set, but that's gotta be a slightly bit annoying for somebody like Van Morrison.
Oh, it's got to be. I think that's fascinating. Good. How's the day gig?
We have our Holy Thursday show tomorrow. We're usually preceded by Mass at St. Patrick's, but there's no morning Mass on Holy Thursday anywhere in the world, at least in the Catholic Church. And so we start a half hour earlier than usual tomorrow, and we got a bunch of guests, including Dr. Scott Hahn, who usually visits us, very well-known speaker and theologian and author, and he always joins us on Holy Thursday to talk about the fourth cup. And then Good Friday, I get off because we have a lot of special programming and the pre-tape show airs in our slot. And so that's always nice to be able to sleep in.
I always feel guilty having you on because I know you get up very early. So I always
Yeah,
appreciate. Yeah. What are you working on?
I do an overnight show, so don't worry.
What are you working on next, Scott?
Right now, I'm writing a couple things. I'm still writing my Waylon Jennings book, and yeah, I'm getting back to that. I finished my Pope Francis documentary for the Catholic Channel on Sirius XM. That's obviously we're holding that until the sad moment comes when he passes, because that's what you do. But also working on my next article for the Strange Brew, which talks about Wolfman Jack, the mystery years, like we're talking about American Graffiti, where he was an enigma. He started off broadcasting out of Mexico, right across the river from Del Rio, Texas, and right across the border, I should say, at the 250,000 watt XERF, and nobody knew. It was for a long time, really up until American Graffiti. Most people didn't know what he looked like. He was super famous. People thought he was black. People thought he was Mexican. Yeah, they thought that they weren't sure where he's broadcasting from, if he was in an airplane or in Mexico. Talk about the myth that he created and how long it lasted. Wolfman Jack that we see in American Graffiti, how that was formulated and used in the movie.
That sounds fascinating. I can't wait to read it. and I can't wait to have you back on to talk about it.
You can check out my website, scottsheaauthor.com. Shea is spelled Shea. You can see all my articles on there, and then that'll link you to the Strange Brew, where these are published initially, and check out my interviews and a little bit more about me, and links to buy my book and all my socials.
Sounds great. As always, Scott, thank you for taking time. It's always fascinating when I have you. I always learn something. And thank you so much, my friend. Have a great week. Enjoy the day off. And let's get together next month. Listeners, go
Absolutely.
check out the website, follow his socials, read his articles, and you'll have a good time. For now, thank you. Everyone, be safe, be kind. We'll talk soon. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Set Listing Bruce. I hope you enjoyed it, and I also hope you check out other episodes of the podcast. I'm going to go through some housekeeping items here on how to contact me and some of my other projects, so please hang around. I'm still on Twitter, aka X, at Jesse Jackson DFW. The show is also on Twitter at Set Lusting Bruce. I and the show have a Facebook page. Please go there and like us. I'm part of a few other podcasts. On Perfectly Good Podcast, me and my co-host Sylvan are talking about every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. Set Lusting Bruce and Perfectly Good Podcast are part of the Pantheon Podcast Network, where we have hundreds of shows dedicated to music. Please check them out. My good friend Charles and I continue to talk all things Doctor Who on Next Stop Everywhere. Lou, Karen, and I talk about pulp culture topics on the JKL Media Podcast. I would love to hear your feedback. Please send me an email to setlistingbruce@gmail.com. You can leave a voicemail, 469-249-2442. Go to iTunes to rate and review any of the podcasts I'm on, and we will read them on the show. Please tell me what you like. Tell me what you dislike. Hook me up with someone you think would be a great guest. Getting to talk to people about their experiences, whether it be music or other creative endeavors, is my passion. And I hope these conversations bring you a little joy, a little peace, and a whole lot of love. Keep hope alive.
There's a joke here somewhere, it's on me. Shake this world off my shoulders. Come on, baby, have a laugh on